Right. In order to solve an absolute value equation, we have to first isolate the absolute value on one side of the equation. With this equation, we already have that going on. But for example, if we were solving something like absolute value of x plus 2 plus 7 equals 10, I would want to begin by subtracting 7 from both sides. That way the absolute value is isolated. So again, on the equation we're working with, the absolute value is already isolated. And so we're going to break this up into two equations. The first equation we just copy without the bars, and the second equation we copy without the bars, but we make the number on the right negative. In general, whenever we're solving absolute value of x equals a, where a is a positive number, we rewrite this as x equals a and x equals negative a. So we break it up into two equations without the absolute value bars, and we solve the two equations individually. All right, I'm going to solve the equation on the right first. So we have two quadratic equations here. Looking at the one on the right, we need to get 0 on one side. When solving a quadratic equation, we often get 0 on one side first. And then now we can factor or use the formula, the quadratic formula. This factors. We would need two numbers that multiply to 25 but add to negative 10, and that's negative 5 and negative 5. So this will factor into x minus 10 times x minus 5 rather, times x minus 5. So negative 5 and negative 5 multiply to 25, but negative 5 and negative 5 add to negative 10. And then now we often set each factor equal to 0, but these factors are the same, so we only have need to set one of them equal to 0. And after adding 5 to both sides, I get 5. So 5 is one solution. Now I need to address the equation on the left. Once again, I'm going to begin by getting 0 on one side and move the 25 to the left. Now this trinomial doesn't factor. There are no numbers that multiply to negative 25 and add to negative 10. So I have to use the quadratic formula. Recall that the quadratic formula is negative b plus minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a. And so first I have to identify a, b, and c. A is the number in front of x squared, b is the coefficient of the x term, and c is the constant on the end. And now I'm going to take these numbers and plug them into the quadratic formula. So we go negative b plus minus square root b squared minus 4 times a times c, and we divide the entire thing by 2 times a. Now we start simplifying this. So we have negative 10, that's of course positive 10, plus minus the square root of negative 10 squared is 100. Negative 4 times 1 times negative 25, that's positive 100. On the next step, all I'm going to do is add the 100s. All right. The 200 actually has a special name. That's the b squared minus 4ac. That's called the discriminant. Notice that 200 is not a perfect square. That confirms that the original equation, the original trinomial, doesn't factor. Anytime we get a discriminant that's a perfect square, like 16 or 49, that means the original trinomial would have factored. Alright, so we don't square root 200 because it's not a perfect square, but we can simplify the square root of 200. Which I'll do off to the side over here. 200 is not a perfect square, but we want to think about a perfect square that goes into 200, and that's 100. I can rewrite 200 as 100 times 2. And then what we can do is square root the 100. The square root of 100 is 10, and the 2 stays in the radical. So square root of 200 can be rewritten or simplified as 10 square root 2. So we have x equals 10 plus minus the I wanted to write 10 square root 2, so we have x equals 10 plus minus, but instead of square root 200, that we know that we just simplified that to 10 square root 2 over 2. Finally, I can simplify a little bit further. I can divide the 10s by 2, so we have 5 plus or minus 5 square root 2. Right, so this equation, the original absolute value equation, has 3 solutions. When entering the answers in MyMathLab, you can put the 3 answers in any order you want, and you can also use the plus and minus, or you could split that into 2 separate solutions. So the solutions are 5 plus or minus 5 square root 2, which again, we could just type that into MyMathLab just with using the plus and minus, and the other solution is 5. So there's 3 answers. We can type it in like that in MyMathLab, or if you wanted to, you could break up the plus and minus and enter in the solution as 3 individual answers. Either way.